This video contains major spoilers for NieR Automata. NieR Automata is a weird game. If you're looking for something traditional, a simple, safe experience where you know what you're getting into, don't play NieR. It's not for you. But if you're someone who craves variety, ingenuity, or deeply philosophical games that push the boundaries of the medium, there's no better game. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk.
Perhaps we're not so different after all. Pod 153, I order you to halt all logical thought and speech.
Fear not, A2! I can handle this!
Androids were designed to protect their human masters.
Even if it's pointless, you still have to do it!
You two are the last remaining members of your That's not the operator. It's...
It's the year 5012 AD and Earth is invaded. A race of aliens use machine life forms to wage war and force the remnants of humanity to flee to the moon. There, they give orders to Yorha, an elite military group comprised of androids. After nearly 7,000 years of conflict, we begin our story in 11945 at the start of the 14th Machine War. We're given control over 2B, one of said Yorha android units. She's a part of a mission to take down a large target off the coast of Hawaii. There, she eventually rendezvous with 9S. While 2B is built for battle, 9S is built for intel. Despite heavy Yorha losses and 9S nearly dying, they manage to destroy the enemy Goliath forces and reawaken at the bunker, the base of operations for all of Yorha. There, they speak to the commander and learn that they are needed by a resistance group in a nameless city ruins. 2B and 9S travel back to Earth to aid the resistance and put an end to the alien and machine reign of terror. The opening is so well done. This is the first really fast-paced action game and first game developed by Platinum that I've played. I've never played something like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, so this was a very different experience for me. Since this is my first time playing one of these games, I'll go ahead and apologize for all of the garbage gameplay you're about to see. It took me a while to get the hang of things. I guess you could technically count Monster Hunter, but that's a very different type of combat compared to NieR. But it's straight to the point and completely representative of the entire game. You're given a brief philosophical dialogue by 2B, and then it's straight into so many different types of gameplay, and that's one of Automata's biggest strengths. It's constantly switching between 3D action, 2D side-scroller, bullet hell, top-down shooter, on-rail shooters. There's just so many genres covered in this one game. And the game is always mixing them up. It's always moving forward with the next idea. I remember seeing the boss of this mission in a lot of trailers and YouTube videos and assumed it was a mid-game boss considering you swing a massive sword at it. But no, it's just the first boss, which perfectly encapsulates Automata. You can also cover multiple genres within a few minutes, and we get a great taste of that in the opening. Although there are some times where the game becomes restrictive and that can be frustrating, sometimes the perspective in some of the bullet hell sections make it difficult to line up your shots and also tell how to avoid projectiles. The camera work can be a little iffy at times. I noticed that the camera likes to particularly lag behind you in Pascal's village, and I was frustrated with the lack of camera control in the Simone boss fight. However, those are all small complaints when you have gameplay that constantly evolves throughout the course of every single mission. Once you do get the hang of everything, this game controls so well. 2B, and I guess the other androids as well, move so fluidly and dynamically. I really enjoyed sliding on the sand in the desert, and stumbling through bushes in the city ruins is a really nice detail, although it is a little annoying after a while. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of how deep the combat mechanics are after about 30 hours of gameplay, because I barely even touched some of the other weapon types. I really only stuck to small and large swords in my playthrough, and really need to continue to experiment around with other weapon types. The combo routes are all really fun to go through, but I feel like the game can get a bit mashy at times, even with the dodge mechanic. I felt like the best way to play would be to mash attack and then mash dodge whenever an enemy's eye started to glow red. I still really enjoyed combat, but I wish it could have been a little bit more deliberate. I'll admit, it took me a while to realize that you can switch between weapon and pod loadouts without having to pause the game. That definitely improved the fluidity and seamlessness of the game, but even after finishing the game, I still found pausing way more useful to heal. I think they should have implemented health drops instead of recovery items. This puts the incentive towards fighting tooth and nail during dire situations, instead of just pausing the game and healing to full. That's one of the reasons why the new Doom games work so well. It's because they encourage the player to make these conscious decisions about their health management. That kind of leads me into a weird situation I ended up at the end of my first playthrough. I died in the Eve fight and forgot to pick up my previous body. I will concede, that's completely my fault. I forgot about that system. But then I proceeded to run out of healing items and get stuck. I even put on the easy auto battle chips during the fight, and still managed to die. I wasn't even touching my controller, and I don't know how it happened. I don't know why the game consumes recovery items when you're sent back to a previous save, but once I let the game beat itself, I began my second playthrough. Still, with no recovery items. And the first mission on the second playthrough is like 30 minutes long with no checkpoints. I get that I was partially to blame for this, and maybe this is just a skill issue, but this seems like a pretty glaring design issue that should have been remedied. It's not on the level of a soft lock, but it's very close to it. However, I really did enjoy combat otherwise. At least in the 2B and A2 sections, the second playthrough with NieR is definitely the low point of the game, both narratively and mechanically. I really like hacking, but it shouldn't be a substitute for the action sections. Since he can only use one weapon, he's significantly weaker and less complex than 2B and A2, so I felt that I had to hack most enemies in the game with him. And that brings me to another issue I have with the combat. Hacking is way too overpowered. There's so little risk and so much reward to hacking, especially in the boss fights. While stronger enemies, and especially bosses, have harder hacking minigames, the risk-reward ratio is so obviously skewed that I felt like I'm handicapping myself if I don't hack them. I understand that this does play into the fact that NieR is a scanner and not a battle android, but I don't think there should have been that big of a mechanical sacrifice to suit the narrative. I wish there would have been a way to not take you out of the experience so much with NieR, which sucks because it feels like there's a weird quality whiplash here. My first playthrough with 2B was so much fun, my second with NieR was super mediocre, but then the final one with A2 was an absolute roller coaster with final sections climbing up the tower being perfect. It can get a little dull replaying the same missions over and over again in Route B. I'm not really sure how to change this, because splitting up 2B and NieR would lose one of the best parts of the game, the little conversations they have between missions. These and the codec calls were some of my weirdly favorite moments in the game. They're a lot more subdued, but we get so much more character development in these brief conversations. I love seeing NieR try to chip away at 2B's rigid facade and finally hear her call him Nines. And it definitely helps that you can continue to travel throughout the world during these because it makes them feel so much more organic. Hearing beautiful conversations in a beautiful world makes any game so much more enjoyable. Even short escort quests are fun because of the small banter. I was surprised to see an open world in Automata. I really didn't know much about the game before jumping in. I assumed it would just be a simple mission structure, but I could honestly run around the city ruins forever. It's so understated and gorgeous. I think that comes down a lot to the music here. I love that this is the first area you come to after the opening because it's such a drastic shift. It's so calming and pensive. It feels like a central hub of the game, both narratively and mechanically. I do wish the desert areas were better developed. It feels like there's really not much to do there even during the main story, but the entire world does feel like it's constantly evolving. You're given shortcuts to new areas after you arrive there. A giant pit opens up in the ruins, and even the tower emerges from it. All of the changes breathe life into an already stellar world. The world doesn't open up to you initially, though. You need to progress through a very defined mission progression, but once you reach Pascal's village, you're given way more freedom, the ability to teleport to various checkpoints, and many more side quests. I'm glad that happened here because I was kinda tired of running between places, and was surprised by the lack of side quests up until that point. Speaking of the side quests, I feel like they're kind of hit or miss here. A lot are just basic fetch quests, but then you have others where you have to hack into friendly machines to change their mind about something. I really like this. It's blending optional narratives with game mechanics and feels really natural here. I was also so happy to see side quests carried over between playthroughs. I really wasn't looking forward to redoing a bunch of side quests that weren't fun. A lot of the main missions are fun to play again, but others are just a pain. Grun, I think that's how you pronounce it, is the best example. I already thought that it overstayed its welcome the first time I fought it. It gets really repetitive, and it's a really long fight, which isn't inherently a bad thing. Plenty of missions and fights are long in this game, but Grun doesn't have enough variation to keep it interesting. Some of the boss levels are a little weird in the second playthrough as well. The first Adam and Eve encounter doesn't change, so I actually beat them before they were finished with their dialogue, so they just became invincible. Sometimes there's also just so many hit and particle effects and projectiles going on that it gets hard to tell what exactly is going on in some of the boss fights. But other than that, the bosses in this game are spectacular. I really like the Koshi and Roshi fights at the end of the tower. The tower and resource recovery units were amazing anyway. They felt like they were finally testing my mastery over all of the different combat mechanics. The hacking especially was awesome because they were much longer challenges. Anyway, it was already an incredible section where you're bouncing back and forth between A2 and 9S, but then you throw in two bosses where you switch back and forth between perspectives and game genres. Then they combine and you randomly switch between A2 and 9S while playing with their unique mechanics. It's such a great way to cap off the best area in the game. It definitely helps that the AI allies are really competent. Usually computer allies suck in games, looking at you, Tears of the Kingdom, but that is absolutely not the case here. Of course, then you're faced with the choice of siding with A2 or 9S. NieR Automata has the most difficult route choices in any game I've ever played. That, along with choosing to erase Pascal's memories, were brutal. I chose to side with A2 the first time around because I felt that 9S was too far gone at that point, and I think it reflects what Eve had said before, that the only reason for 9S to live is to kill the machines, kill A2. When I finally did side with 9S, I was blown away by the final hacking of A2. I wish so many more of the boss hacks were like this, and I really wish that they would have forced you to go into her settings and make her self-destruct herself. The final section spawns wave after wave of enemies, so I assumed that there was something else that I needed to progress, but I just had to wait it out. This would have been a really Undertale-esque way to finish things off, and I think it would have been an incredible moment for players. Like Undertale, Automata doesn't just break the fourth wall, it bulldozes it. I've mentioned multiple playthroughs a handful of times so far. I know that some of the community refers to them as playthroughs, but I think that's kind of misleading. You aren't playing the same game over and getting different endings. You're going from start to finish, but unlike most games, the chronological order of events is not the same as the gameplay order of events. The game makes it very clear that you should keep playing after ending A by giving you a pop-up, and you're given even more of a hint when the beginning of the second playthrough is with 9S and the little robot. The first and second playthroughs have roughly the same story, but the third is very different. There's tons of reasons to love each one, so I'll try to separate my thoughts in playthrough order. I really liked the massive contrast between the opening, bunker, and city ruins arrival. Like I said earlier, the opening is adrenaline-inducing, but then you arrive at the bunker and it's so peaceful but also monochromatic. Of course, arriving at the city ruins is peaceful, but it's so vibrant. You get so many different color and thematic palettes in the first 30 minutes of the game, and this goes along with the rapidly changing gameplay. Of course, finally getting to the amusement park and to Pascal's village was a great moment. You realize that maybe all machines aren't looking to fight. I particularly like the adaptive soundtrack of the amusement park. The music shifts depending on whether you're in the alleyways or the main area. Speaking of Pascal, I love him, particularly his voice. It's just so soothing and friendly, which is something you typically wouldn't expect from a robot. These two areas recontextualize the whole conflict, especially after Anemone mentions that they've been trading with one another. It seems like the machines, particularly ones that have disconnected from the network, aren't too keen on fighting. So that begs the question, why? Why does this conflict have to go on? Of course, you get your answer way down the line, but that question is in the back of your mind until you get there. I was also confused when 2B and 9S took their blindfolds off in the final Eve fight. I really expected it to be a grand and metaphorical moment where you finally see the world for what it truly is, but clearly that's not the direction Yoko Taro wanted to go. The real treat in the first playthrough is when 2B is forced to kill 9S. It's such a sad moment, and 2B is so heartbroken over this. It always ends like this is such a sad line too. At first I thought it was referencing the fact that sometimes androids don't retain their memories, so while their bodies continue to live on, they themselves don't. Of course, we learn later that it's more complicated than that, but I wish the game would have explored this conflict more. Something similar was really well done in Xenoblade 2, and I think that theme would have worked perfectly within the world of NieR Automata. Regardless, you can tell that this is why 2B was so reluctant to open up to 9S. She feared this very moment. As soon as she let her guard down, 9S dies. This line also retroactively shows why 2B is so hell-bent on helping 9S in the opening. She doesn't want to lose him again. Now, 9S doesn't actually die here, which at first I didn't really like. I'm not a fan of bringing characters back from the dead immediately after they die. I feel like it typically cheapens their deaths, but here it works better, but only after the second playthrough. Like the gameplay side of things, the 9S playthrough is definitely the weakest part of the narrative. You go through mostly the same missions, although a lot of it gets recontextualized with additional cutscenes. I get that this makes sense because 9S is a scanner. He should have more intel than 2B, but it's mostly just rehashed content. I did really like accessing 2B settings as 9S in the bunker, especially because it's a carbon copy of exactly what you did when you first messed with the settings as 2B. It's a nice little detail that you might miss, but I only remember because I messed around with the self-destruct settings a bunch and remembered his dialogue. I do really like Simone's characterization here. Jean-Paul's side quest also does a lot to round out her character, even though she's just a boss. Of course, the most important plot moment in the second playthrough is the revelation that humanity is long gone. At first, I thought it would be revealed that the war was made up because humanity needed it for something. I wasn't entirely off on that, however, it's the machines who are perpetuating the war. The answer doesn't come until way later, but it's clear that this really affected androids in the past. Humans today already struggle to keep going when they have nothing to live for, but androids are hard-coded to faithfully serve humanity. Sharing this info would mean the collapse of Yorha. I really like that a bunch of the optional lore is present in the data logs. I like being able to piece together events which happened before the start of the game. I'm assuming a lot of these were summarizing the events of the original NieR. I've never played it before, but I do know that it takes place far before Automata. The first two playthroughs are pretty standard, but the final is so incredible. There's so many amazing moments, Losing the bunker to the virus, 2B dying, Pascal's village being destroyed, it's just heartbreak after heartbreak. Pascal's story especially, I loved him so much, but seeing his village for the final time was terrible. The machines at the amusement park are already zombies, so that thought is already going through your head as you race to get there. Then you see machines cannibalizing each other. Okay, not good, but not awful. Pascal and the children are still alive, so there's hope, but he taught them fear, and overcome by their fear, the children commit mass suicide. Pascal, overcome with grief, begs you to erase his memories. You're given the option to do that, kill him, or leave him be. This choice destroyed me. I don't think I've ever felt so bad for a side character in a game, let alone been hit with such an awful decision. There's really no good choice here. I chose to erase his memories. I finally revisited him, only to find him selling the remains of his people, completely unaware. It's awful. It's so tragic. I really wish games would explore this option more. Yes, you have multiple choices, but none of them are good. In fact, I feel like that's one of the central themes of this game. You have so many good people with good intentions and generally good actions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a good outcome. That's relevant to real life as well. You can try your hardest and be the best person you can be, but sometimes it's just not enough. NieR Automata is that tragedy. Yorha is nothing more than a disposable step for machine evolution. Devila and Popula are wonderful people who have experienced nothing but pain, and 2B must continue to kill 9S over and over again. Even ending E, the true ending, isn't even all that happy. Yeah, 2B, 9S, and A2 are all still alive, but what else is there? The machines won and are continuing on to the next step of their evolution. Yorha has been completely wiped out. What's left? And that's what the credits try to answer. The ending credits after ending E is one of my favorite moments in any game. It's a brutally difficult bullet hell, and only the most dedicated, masochistic players will find a way to solo it. Death after death, you'll be given encouragement from someone. Then, the game will finally ask you if you want help. The solo vocal gives way to a huge choir, and multiple players will join you.
Still we're gonna shout it loud, even if our words seem meaningless. It's like I'm carrying the weight of the world. I hope that some way, somehow, that I can save every one of us. But the truth is that I
Once you're finished, you'll be given the option to help other players, but there's a catch. You must delete your save data to do so. This is so beautiful. I wasn't ready to part ways with my save data. There were so many side quests and other tidbits that I wanted to finish, but I wanted to help. Other players had given their save data to me, so I wanted to give that feeling to others. This is, without a doubt, the most incredible act of compassion and empathy I have ever seen from a game. And Automata makes it very clear that this is not a joke. It goes through, page by page, and deletes everything. Every item, every quest, every piece of lore. Nothing is left untouched. And you get no confirmation that you've helped someone. For all I know, I deleted my save for no reason, but that's not the point. It's there to get you to think, but more importantly, to feel. For the first time in NieR Automata, things don't look dark and bleak. Yes, there are no more humans, no more Yorha, the machines have won, but in spite of that, in spite of overwhelming loss and destruction, there's hope, there's compassion, there's understanding, there's love. It's an incredible moment that elevated NieR Automata to more than a game. It transcended into the real world and became a vessel for selflessness. I can't overstate how powerful of a moment this ending is, and it's a perfect way to cap off the story. But this game doesn't end even when you delete your save data, at least not for me. Here I am a few days after finishing the game, and NieR Automata has consumed my thoughts. It asks so many deep philosophical and existential questions, not only explicitly, but also implicitly. Right off the bat with the name To Be, obviously a reference to Shakespeare's famous soliloquy, To Be or Not to Be, in Hamlet. And we have that right off the bat with 2B's monologue before the game starts, wondering if life is some kind of punishment and if she'll be able to kill the god who decided to make the world this way. Existentialism is really at the core of this game's philosophy. With so much death and destruction on both sides, it's not hard to see why either. 2B being forced to murder her partner over and over, A2 watching the fall of her comrades, and 9S seeing 2B die all make a good case for death over life. But, like I said earlier, I think the ending credits give us a good enough reason to find a way to go on. Machines are also desperate to imitate humans. We see that really early on. A lot of machines are trying to have sex, obviously to no avail, and I really like the conversation Pascal has with 2B and 9S about nuclear weapons. It briefly mentions nuclear deterrence, but Pascal also brings up that this is dangerous information and needs to be handled with extreme caution. There's also the scene with the machines performing their own version of Romeo and Juliet, but my favorite is the religious implications with the cult and the abandoned factory. They want to die and become as gods, which seems funny to us players, but then you think back to what Yorha is fighting for. Humans. Or what the machines are fighting for. Aliens. And humanity and the aliens are extinct and hidden away. Essentially, gods. Humans are the gods of androids, and aliens are the gods of the machines. Both in the mystical sense, but also as their creators. The machines are striving to become like the creators by forcing evolution through war and failed social experiments. Yorha moves closer and closer to humanity by allowing themselves to develop complex emotions. This theme is so important that they even decided to name a version of the game after it. NieR Automata, Become as Gods Edition. I don't have this version, I went with the Switch release, the End of Yorha Edition, and there's a very simple explanation why I went with the Switch version. It was $10 cheaper. In hindsight, that may not have been the best idea considering the game doesn't run great. There are some weird lighting issues here and there, and some of the textures are kind of questionable. Regardless, the religious implications also force an important question. How do you have morals without a god? That's one of the core reasons why the machines built these societies, and why Adam and Eve are so curious about humanity. This is really just scratching the surface of the philosophical ideas presented in this game, and there have been countless videos dissecting these questions even more, so I'll leave it to much better content creators to delve deeper into those thoughts. NieR Automata is not for everyone. I think it takes a special type of person to enjoy it, but also a really special type of person to create it. Yoko Taro is a creative visionary when it comes to game design. Playing Automata has forced me to reflect on how I view games. Do I view them as art that strives to push the medium forward? Do I take an objective stance and try to look at the game logically? Of course, this isn't black and white, it exists as a spectrum. I think I definitely lean towards the art side of things. I think it's a beautiful work of art, but there are definitely some downsides to it. I try to recognize innovation and ingenuity without losing some of that objectivity. I hope that philosophy is apparent in these reviews. I think that there are very few games that are completely awful or completely perfect, so I try to recognize the good and bad in everything that I play. I felt like I did a decent job with that with Automata, but there was one thing that really threw me for a loop when writing this script. Usually when I write a review, it's easy to group together all of my ideas into tighter sections. Gameplay, story, world, characters, etc. While there are chunks of this review that are dedicated to specific ideas, I found myself wanting to jump between ideas since they all felt so related. At first, I chalked it up to this game having multiple playthroughs. That may be true, but I think it's also the fact that everything seems so connected here. Story, gameplay, world, philosophy, everything. It's so woven together and makes for an extremely well put together package. Even after 4,700 words of script, I still think about Automata. The ideas it presented, the story it told, the incredible bosses, and especially the music. If you're a traditional gamer, don't play this game. But if you're like me, someone who enjoys the artistic beauty of the medium, this will be an unforgettable experience for you. NieR Automata is a wholly unique game. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. Whether it's consciously humming its tunes or subconsciously thinking about its philosophy. Thanks for watching.
Did the data salvage restore all of their past memories?
Yes.
And are those recovered parts of the same design as previous ones?
Yes.
Then, won't that simply lead us to the same conclusion as before?
I cannot deny the possibility. However, the possibility of a different future also exists. A future is not given to you. It is something you must take for yourself.